happy Monday to all of you. I hope that by God's grace you are staying well, you and your family. We are finally on the mend over here. Well, I'm on the mend. That's a good thing. And looking forward to bringing you this live stream. This is part 3 in a series of teachings that I have been doing on the wildly popular television series called The Chosen. And it's wildly popular and wildly controversial. People have a lot of strong feelings about a television show. But there's a sense in which I get it. I think that a lot of people's concerns are coming from a good place. They want to be biblically faithful in what they're doing, what they're watching, and what they're recommending to their friends, as well as helping their friends not get kind of trapped in some problematic theology and all of those things I commend. But in this series, what I've been doing is trying to use the interaction that I've been getting on my social media about The Chosen as some ways to help teach people how to reflect more deeply on the issues, how to differentiate between things that are a genuine concern, things that are a possible concern, something to keep our eye on, and the things that are not really a concern. And so I hope that you've been enjoying this teaching series and that you've been finding it helpful. I've really appreciated all the feedback that I've gotten. In this conversation, we're going to go over the second most common claim that people gave on my social media related to the LDS issue. And that is that Dallas Jenkins thinks that LDS members worship the same Jesus as historic Christianity. I think that this is an interesting claim, and we will definitely be doing a deep dive into this claim in this podcast. So, again, one of the tips that I shared last time is when you hear a claim, try to slow the conversation down and ask the question, something to the effect of, can you give me an example of that? Which some of you have seen that I have done on social media. Another great question to ask a person when they make a claim is, what is the source? So that I can go look it up for myself. And so when I heard this claim on social media that Dallas Jenkins thinks LDS people worship the same Jesus that we as historic Christians do, I asked people that, well, what is your source for that claim? Now, I want to make an important observation here. And that is, I would say probably all of the people who posted links to what I call receipts for this claim, all of them gave me links to secondary sources. They gave me links to blog posts or other people's commentary or that sort of a thing, or just a clip. That's not what you want to do. What you want to do is you want to chase down the original clip to, again, look at in context, just like we did in the previous episode. So it took yours truly quite a while to find said receipts for this claim. Because, again, there were all of these just YouTubers commenting on it. I'm like, what's the source? Where is the original source in context? Where do I find it? Well, it took me a while, but I persisted and did, in fact, find the source. So it was from an interview from 2021 on an LDS podcast with an LDS YouTuber. And it seems like from their channel, he's really trying to equip LDS people to talk about their faith. And so Dallas Jenkins went on this podcast in 2021 to promote the show, which, as I said in part 1 of this series, for me, that's not that big of a deal. If he got invited on Good Morning America to promote the show with a bunch of pagans, he'd probably go do it. So would I if it was my show. So the fact that someone from the LDS Church who has a YouTube channel wants to have Dallas on, to me, that's not terribly problematic. So we're going to watch the clip right now. It starts about 9 minutes into this, and this is from a show called Saints Unscripted. So we're going to watch Dallas Jenkins, the original clip where he says that LDS members worship the same Jesus as historic Christians.
Will the audience be bothered by the fact that there are LDS people involved? Personally, I didn't really care because I've worked with people of all different traditions, I've worked with atheists. I've partnered with people who've distributed my movies who had zero desire to, or connection to Christ and couldn't have cared less about it. So even if I had significant disagreements with the LDS community, which I've learned I have fewer than I thought I did, but even with that, I was okay. I was comfortable with that because as long as they're treating the show properly, that's all that matters.
Just really quick, let me comment on this because this is the exact same point that I made in episode 1 of this series, is that this issue that Dallas has distributors that are members of the LDS Church, or he has people that hang lights, or people that are working on building the app for the show that are LDS members. To me, these are more petty concerns. These are not, this is what I would say is a version of the genetic fallacy. And Christians all the time partner with people who are not Christians to get funding and distribution for films. To me, this is not a terribly problematic issue as long as they're not shaping the content, which Dallas Jenkins has said repeatedly that they're not. Okay, let's go back to the clip.
So it's been, I can honestly say it's been one of the top 3 most fascinating and beautiful things about this project has been my growing brother and sisterhood with people of the LDS community that I never would have known otherwise, and learning so much about your faith tradition, and realizing, gosh, for all the stuff that maybe we don't see eye to eye on, that all happened.
Okay, let me stop it there real quick again and make a quick comment. So here's, for me, a first difficulty is when he says that, he has brotherhood and sisterhood with members of the LDS Church. I get why he's saying this. Let's say the most charitable reading of this statement is he means brotherhood, sisterhood in the most kind of generic way possible. Sometimes if I meet somebody casually, I'll say, have a good day, brother. Have a good day, sister. Now, do I know 100% that person's a brother or sister in the Lord? No. It's just a casual conversation. I might say that. To me, that's the most charitable way of reading what Dallas is saying here. But technically, we can't say that members of the LDS Church are technically brothers and sisters in the Lord, because we are defining many of our terms in different ways. We have different holy books that have primacy, and we have not just differences about tertiary issues, we have differences about core issues where they are redefining key core doctrines. Okay. So technically, I am, in a spiritual sense, a brother or sister in the Lord with other historic Christians. Okay. Now, in the LDS Church, they have a different theology of that. They would say that all humans are children of God. They are all brothers and sisters. So they define and use that term differently. We've had a few LDS members come on our Instagram page and make comments to that effect on the teachings that we've done at the Center for Biblical Unity and pointing out the biblical case that only historic Christians are technically children of God. But the LDS doctrine is that all humans are children of God. So we can rightfully say brothers and sisters to one another. How Dallas means this in this context, I think, is an open question. I've given you a couple of possible scenarios. Okay, let's keep going.
Faith tradition, and realizing, gosh, for all the stuff that maybe we don't see eye to eye on, that all happened. That's all based on stuff that happened after Jesus was here. The stories of Jesus we do agree on, and we love the same Jesus. That's not something that you often hear. Sometimes it's like, oh, they believe in a different Jesus than we do.
Statement.
Yeah. No, it's the same. I mean, I'll sink or swim on that statement, and it's controversial, and I don't mind getting criticized at all for the show, and I don't mind being called a blasphemer. I don't like it when my friends are, and I've made it very clear that if I go down, I'm going down swinging, protecting my friends and my brothers and sisters, and so I don't deny we have a lot of theological differences, but we love the same Jesus. And the guys at VidAngel are more passionate about this show. And I do hope that viewers judge the show on its own merits. And much like when you read the Bible, you don't go, hey, I heard that the ink that was printed on this Bible was provided by someone I disagree with. And so or the driver of the truck who's delivering the Bibles to this church or this country, he's not a believer, or he's a Mormon, or he's a Catholic, therefore that Bible is no longer valid. They would never think that. So I hope that they apply the same thing to the show. If you're in the LDS community watching the show or watching this interview right now and thinking, that's an evangelical, I'm not sure I can trust him, or vice versa, that evangelical is being positive towards the LDS community, I'm not sure I can trust him. I do hope that you'll judge the show on its own merits. But I do think that it's been a beautiful thing to see that we can agree on the stories of Christ. And I think that's what's been so beautiful about seeing the show grow like it has, is you've got Catholics and Jews and Mormons, again, I'm sorry if I use the wrong term, and evangelicals. We're all loving the same show.
Okay, that's the clip. And so a couple of comments that I want to make here. He uses the term brothers and sisters again. He does seem to, in the context, I think, be using it not in the casual way of, just generic brothers and sisters like I might use in a casual conversation, but more in a spiritual way, that he sees LDS members as brothers and sisters. For me, this is confusing. This is the most charitable way of saying it is confusing. I think a more a harder way of saying it is that this is just plain wrong. If that's how Dallas means it, as seeing Mormons as brothers and sisters, I think that's super confusing. But what really muddies the waters even more, I think, is this idea that LDS members and historic Christians agree on the same Jesus. And Dallas says, I'm going down, sink or swim. I'm going down on this issue, that they're the same. So after thinking about this a lot and hearing a couple other times where Dallas has similar conversations, here's what I think he's saying. I think what he's saying is that the LDS Church affirms the King James Version of the Bible. Historic Christians affirm the King James Version of the Bible. Same Jesus, same Bible, King James Version, okay? The Book of Mormon preserves events that happen after the ascension of Jesus up into heaven. And then he comes to the Americas. That's the plot of the Book of Mormon. Where we introduce the differences about Jesus is in Jesus's ministry in the Americas, and then as explained in Doctrine and Covenants, which is kind of the official book of doctrine of the LDS Church. This is where we get the so-called different Jesus. I think that what Dallas is doing is he's saying something that is technically true, but extremely confusing. Okay. So, yes, same Jesus, King James Version of the Bible, affirmed by the LDS Church, King James Version of the Bible, used by historic Christians. Same, 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 same. Okay. I think that's what he is saying. Now, what we think about the claims of the fuller picture of Jesus in the LDS Church, as explained in Doctrine and Covenants and the Book of Mormon, different Jesuses. Okay, hopefully you're following this. So again, we're just gathering our data. We're trying to summarize key ideas, what is happening here. All right. So that was the origin of the statement of the whole same Jesus controversy. Now, most of you have only ever seen the short snippet where he says, we worship the same Jesus. But when you look at the whole context, the surrounding context, and remember, meaning comes from context, not from snippets. Okay. So when you look at the surrounding context, I'm pretty sure that's what Dallas is saying. King James Bible, same Jesus. Okay. Then he goes on Melissa Doherty's show. And she asks him about this. And we're going to watch this clip, and it's going to take a minute because she really presses him on a couple of issues. And I also want to say that I appreciate both of their love and concern for members of the LDS Church. And they aren't just about trashing LDS members. So, all right, let's watch this clip from Dallas's discussion with my friend Melissa Doherty.
But you've been on record saying that you have LDS friends and you love the same Jesus. What does that mean? Can you break that down for me?
Yeah. So before I did The Chosen, my knowledge of the LDS Church was, I would say, I don't know what I would say limited, but it was limited to just my upbringing in the evangelical church of studying LDS. I mean, I studied it in college where, I had a class as I was a Bible major in college. So I had a class that was about religions of the world. And so you study the different religions and you want to know what they say. And, and I've, seen videos and read articles about the LDS Church and Catholic Church and all that kind of stuff. All different religions, faith, denominations, and all that. In the last 3 years, I have spent hundreds and hundreds of hours, thousands of hours with LDS people because LDS folks make up a good chunk of the distribution company that's handling our show, Angel Studios. They're not an LDS company, but they're based in Utah, and a good portion of them are LDS. As a lot of people know, the set that we used for season 2, for part of season 2, is owned by the LDS Church. So I've gone to Israel with several LDS folks for research for the show, who are partnered with me on the show because they're handling distribution. I've prayed with them, hundreds of times. Some of them have become my closest friends, or at least some of my closest friends.
Now, again, I think that this is a long way around to get to Melissa's question about the same Jesus. But so far, I think that, again, he's recounting things that we went over in the first part of this teaching series, saying that I have a friend who's in the LDS Church is the same as saying I have a friend who's a Buddhist, or I have a friend who's an atheist. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with having a friendship with somebody. There's nothing wrong with having a business partner. who's from a different worldview. There's nothing even wrong with saying, I have a close friend. I have a family member. I have family members I really care about. I don't shun them. Okay. So none of these things that he's bringing up so far to me are problematic. Now I'm listening for his answer, though, to Melissa's question about the same Jesus. Now, I will say this, I am not as comfortable with his statement about praying with members of the LDS church. It's harder for me. I haven't done that. Um, and I don't think I would feel comfortable with that, but that's because I wouldn't feel comfortable praying with a Buddhist, um, if they're the ones doing the praying. Like, we have two different gods. That's not going to work. Um, Now, if I was praying for a Buddhist and I was praying in the name of Jesus, to the triune God, that would be a little different. If I was, my husband and I once tried to pray for some Jehovah's Witnesses on the street corner, and we stopped to talk to them for a little while and asked if we could pray for them. They absolutely would not pray with us, because even they perceived we had two different Jesuses. And so we went over, we walked 10 feet away from them, and we prayed for them anyways. But, I don't have any problem praying with someone from a different religion or faith tradition. It's just, I wouldn't enter into that situation thinking that we're praying necessarily to the same God, if that makes sense. Okay, let's continue here.
Who are partnered with me on the show because they're doing just handling distribution. I've prayed with them, hundreds of times. Some of them have become my closest friends, or at least some of my closest friends. And so when I made a comment which has aroused some response from even good friends
Hey
of mine.
man, God said he wouldn't let you mess up, so maybe this is
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Where I talked about, we love the same Jesus.
Yeah.
And I regret maybe saying it with less clarity than I'm saying it now. But I don't regret the statement, because I believe that about at least the friends that I've gotten to know, those who have gotten to know well. And what I mean by that is, we don't share the same religion. I mean, I don't consider myself religious. I don't like that word. I have a relationship with Christ, not a religion. And so I believe we have I know we have a different quote unquote religion. Mm-hmm. And there are several things that we have strongly different beliefs about. But what I was referring to was, when we're talking about Jesus of Nazareth, we're talking about the Jesus of this show and the Jesus of the Gospels that I'm writing this show about. Mm-hmm. I have asked every conceivable question of my LDS friends about Jesus, based on everything that I've heard, read, things that you've said, things that, I've done a deep dive into all of this. And I would say that, number one, there are things that I have read or heard from ex-LDS or from articles or videos or whatever, mm-hmm. that simply don't reflect the beliefs of at least the LDS folks that I know, or at least most of them.
Okay, let me make a quick comment about this issue that he's raising up, because he was almost about to say, he admitted that LDS and historic Christianity are different religions. Okay, I appreciate that. He was just, I think, about to say, yes, it's a different Jesus, but then he went off on this little rabbit trail about how some members that he's interacted with who are members of the LDS church have different beliefs than what he learned in school or read in books or heard on apologetics podcasts. Now, I can relate to this. When I first started having deeper conversations with a member of the LDS church, I noticed this issue too, that there were things that I had read in books written by a so-called LDS apologetics experts that then when I talked to the LDS members that I would interact with, those two things didn't seem to line up. And I'm like, well, I hear that you believe this. And then I ask, and they're like, oh no, that's a rumor. We don't actually believe that. And so when that happens, and I don't know if Dallas has done this. So, but what you have to do is you have to go to the official statements of the LDS Church. And it's really easy. There's not a lot of places you have to go. You can just go right to their website because there's only one official website. It makes it super easy. And you can look in Doctrine and Covenants. That's where their official doctrines are summarized. Now, you can read their holy books, Pearl of Great Price, the Book of Mormon, and that sort of a thing. But really, the best two sources to go to, like, you don't want to go to the letters of Joseph Smith or the letters of Brigham Young. Those are not authoritative. Those are not authoritative to the average LDS person. You have to go look in Doctrine and Covenants, and on their official website. Okay, so this is an issue where things get a little muddy, and I can relate to what Dallas is saying here. That when he's interacted with people, he's like, well, wait a minute, I read this apologetics book by so and so ex-Mormon or so and so Mormon apologist, and they say this is what you believe. And then you talk to the LDS member and they say, no, that's not what we believe. So primary sources is what's important, and that matters. Okay, let's continue here.
Do you think it reflects the beliefs of the LDS Church that they follow?
Sometimes. I mean, that's the thing. So when right now, let's real quick, when we were just talking about the Trinity, 15 minutes ago, even in that discussion, you and I had to spend as much time clarifying what we meant by the things we were saying as we did about the actual things we were saying, because it was so nuanced.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about the evangelical church, when someone says to me, who's not a believer, oh, you're an evangelical. Oh, so you believe, and they list off the things that I believe, or the people like Joel Osteen, or the people who protest at funerals, at military funerals, and who hold up these anti-gay signs. Or they'll start rattling off things that they know and understand about the evangelical world. Or they go, oh, you believe in the Bible, right? That's the Bible, the Old Testament, where it talks about killing your enemies, or and I have to spend all this time like clarifying the nuance of it. And so the fact that there are things that I have asked my LDS friends about who are deeply ingrained in the LDS Church, or at least I don't know if ingrained is the right word, but involved, and who tell me that is not accurate, that is not what I believe, multiple times. There are other things where they said, yes, we believe that, and here's why. And I go, oh, that's interesting, I don't believe that. Or there's plenty of things where I've said to them, yeah, this is where we diverge significantly. This is where I believe that borders on, if not heresy, borders on heresy. It's, this is the big problem we have with it.
So again, let me pause for a second and make a comment. So it's clear to me in this clip, this is one of the moments that's more clear with Dallas, is that he doesn't believe that historic Christianity and the LDS Church have exactly the same beliefs. Okay, so that is not what he's arguing. And he seems to freely admit that there are points of departure between the two religions. And so he's admitted now that historic Christianity and the LDS Church are two different religions. He's admitted that they do not believe the same thing. So now we're still waiting for him. He was really quick with his answer on the LDS podcast. We're about 8 minutes into his answer here, and it's not as clear, it's not as quick, but we're going to continue to walk with him because we want to give him a fair hearing. That's what we do if we are abiding by the golden rule of apologetics and treating others the way we would want to be treated in presenting our perspectives. So let's continue.
Plenty of things like that. There's also things where I'm like, where they're saying to me, that thing that people criticize us about was written by a leader in the church, but is not gospel for the LDS Church. Or some of us Mormons believe that, but not all of us, whatever it is. And to me, I go, instead of going, no, you don't really believe that, or no, you must be lying, or you must not understand your own faith, I go, I've had plenty of things said about my faith, my evangelical beliefs that are inaccurate from well-meaning people who don't understand the nuance of it. It's certainly possible. And I know there's probably a viewer right now who's going, no, it's not possible. I understand everything there is to know about the LDS Church, and any nuance about it is incorrect that you're saying. Fine, but I'm just saying it's possible to sometimes get certain assumptions wrong about an entire belief system, and to not recognize that there can be within an entire belief system groups of people who have varying, nuanced, different beliefs.
Yeah.
And when I hear, like, when I'll watch a video online of it'll say like ex-Mormon comes to Christ, and they describe their story, and I'll ask some of my LDS friends about that, or I'll look it up myself, or I'll look at, or I'll just watch it myself and go, their experience or what they're saying about their parents or what they were taught does not match what XYZ LDS friend of mine, what their experience is or what their beliefs are. Now, either they're lying to me, and they're all just lying to me, which would be quite strange because they've devoted their entire careers and lives to my show. Like people at Angel Studios and some of my close friends in the LDS Church have literally told me that they have that their careers and their lives have become about getting this show out to the world. So the Jesus of Nazareth, the Jesus that I'm portraying in this show, is a Jesus that, at least for my LDS friends that I'm working with, at least those, I'm not talking about the whole church. I can't speak for the whole church. And let me make something also very clear. The whole church does not want me speaking for them. The LDS Church does not formally endorse the show. They have never made any kind of statement of endorsement for the show. They are as passionate about making sure that the show is not formally associated with the church as I am. In fact, all of my LDS friends, by the way, who work on the show, do not want the show associated with the LDS Church because they know that that will cause people to not watch it or be upset or offended. Like, they are fully aware of the reputation. They are fully aware of how much distraction it can cause. And they are saying, it's your show. We are signing on for your show. It's an evangelical based show, and we are just interested in getting it out to the world. So that needs to be clear too. But all I'm sure this isn't the final thing, but the final thing I want to say about this point is that there has not been a word, and I mean that literally, not one word said by anyone in the LDS Church that I work with or that I know that has said, make sure you say this or change that or tweak this about Jesus, or that doesn't align with our beliefs, whatever it is. So the Jesus that we are working on together or portraying, I believe you can use the word, it's the same Jesus. And when we say things like, no, LDS people believe in a different Jesus, a false Jesus, a heretical Jesus, whatever it is, whatever term you want to use, I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to debate the specifics of that. I'm just going to say, I think that starts to become wordplay. Like, if you and I are talking about Jordan Ross, our mutual friend, and you say, do you know Jordan? Yeah, I know Jordan, of course. He's plays Little James in The Chosen, and he's got a wife and kids and a dog, and he's has this. We start talking about all these things, and if I say, yeah, and he's 6 feet tall, and you went, no, he's not. He's 5'4" or 5'5", whatever he is. I go, no, he's 6 feet. I don't think you'd say, no, you're talking about a different Jordan Ross. You'd say you're wrong about this aspect of Jordan Ross. It's not a different Jordan, it's just you're wrong about this aspect. Now, I know there's a massive difference in some of the things that some LDS folks say about Jesus that have that is much greater import than height. I understand that, of course. I'm just saying that when we start getting into semantics of same Jesus, different Jesus, I think it becomes about semantics and not about the actual reality. And Jesus.
Okay, we finally arrived at Dallas's answer. It took 12 minutes, but we got there. All right. So if I'm to summarize what he says in this clip with what he said in the previous clip on the LDS podcast, I think what he's saying is that King James Bible affirmed by the LDS Church, King James Bible affirmed by historic Christianity. Same Jesus, okay? Not taking into account the Book of Mormon or Pearl of Great Price or Doctrine and Covenants and all their other holy books, okay? Same Jesus, okay? But then when we add on these other features from other holy books, this is when we get into the comparison of the Jordan Ross example of, will these add additional features onto Jesus? And where he's saying, no, 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 it's still the same Jesus, but you have these other features wrong that you want to add on to Jesus. I think that's what he's saying. If I was sitting across from him at coffee, that's how I would try to give my best summary of his position. But this brings up an important point when we're engaging with somebody from that holds a viewpoint that we don't quite understand, or maybe a viewpoint that's different from our own. We want to take time to first hear them all the way out, even if it takes a while. Be patient. It's a fruit of the Spirit. And then summarize it back to them. Let me see if I'm understanding what you're saying. So we want to listen to understand, not just listen for the person to stop talking so I can jump on them and correct them. Okay. All right, let's continue because Melissa, as you can see from her little facial expressions, God bless her. I love her. She's gonna push back on this a little bit. So let's continue.
If you have somebody in your circle that's giving you theological advice that's an LDS, do you see why your informed audience would be concerned about that? Like, so people that know about the LDS church, it's like, it's their theology.
Right.
But where it kind of concerns the informed audience that loves you
Yeah.
is if your worldview is going to be affected by the LDS worldview.
Right.
And then that gets into the show.
I'm not taking theological advice from any LDS folks. I'm getting occasional information from them on where they stand. But
what do you mean by that?
Well, I don't get any theological advice. I don't have any LDS folks telling me, here's some advice. Here's what you should do, or here's how you should think, or here's some tips on how to get closer to Jesus, or here's some tips on how to get into heaven or into the particular heavenly realm. And I've been, like I said, I've spent thousands of hours with, a dozen LDS folks over the last 3 years. Very, very close friends. I've never once gotten a piece of advice.
Okay.
So I just think the word advice is a very specific term. And so there's never been any quote unquote advice or influence that would get into the show, because it's not that's never been their intent, and they've never.
So these are friends, just like casual friends that are not involved with putting on content for the show or giving you some sort of feedback, because you understand there's like groups of people that think that you probably have like this group of people from all these all these religions that you sit together at a table, and one's LGBT, one is Mormon, one is Catholic, and that's a progressive probably, and you probably have a New Ager out there somewhere, and you all get together, so it's like I don't think that's what that is.
So again, all of my LDS friends are involved in the show in some way. So that's how I've gotten to know them, is
like involved, like they hold a camera involved, or
no, they're in charge of like the distribution of the show to the world, they created the app,
Okay, again, I think this is a really important clarifying point, is that he says very clearly, and so we have to, where he is clear, let's also be clear and give him deference. He says very clearly he does not have members of the LDS Church who provide theological content or consulting on the show. So again, this charge that we looked at last time, that there's LDS content embedded in the show, I think that would be, at this point, based on what he's saying and what I've seen in the show, I think it would be purely a coincidence. He says and we looked at last time some receipts that he hasn't read the Book of Mormon in its entirety. It doesn't influence him in how he does the show. He has read a few passages in it at the recommendation of friends. So here again, he says, yes, there are LDS people who help with the distribution, creating the app, employing other employees to do these jobs. That's clear, but they are not acting as consultants on the show or helping to shape the content of the show. Okay, let's continue.
That makes sense. Yeah.
They created the app, or they I mean, most of it is around the app. I mean, the Chosen app, which is the free app that goes out to the entire world, has been
And you
translated.
got in flack for the VidAngel thing too, because I know that that's, yeah.
Well, that's where the vast majority of my LDS friends have come from. And then because of that, then I've met more. And we filmed half a season in Utah, on that set in Goshen, Utah, which is owned by the LDS Church.
Mhm.
And again, there were people who go, how can you use a set that's owned by the LDS Church? And I go, why weren't you complaining about the set we used in season 1 where we were filming on a soundstage owned by atheists? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
there's no,
You can't win.
Using a set
Yeah.
that's owned by anybody has no, doesn't like seep its way into the script. And now all of a sudden there's lines of dialogue that are more atheist because we're shooting on a set.
This is a good point Dallas brings up.
Okay, so that's the end of that clip. But again, just reinforcing points that we've made before. So, this whole same Jesus thing, and but what it felt a little bit like trying to pin down a cloud. But I think we learned a couple of points in there. It wasn't as clear as what he said on the LDS podcast. There is a part of me that's like the skeptic part of me that's like, why didn't he give the same clear answer? It just felt a little bit. Did anyone else feel this way? It was a little circuitous, but okay, we found our way through it. Um, Now Melissa continues to try to press Dallas about issues and what his personal beliefs are versus the beliefs of the people that he works with. And this led to a very interesting exchange where she's again trying to press him just to make sure that he's clear that these are two different religions. So let's take a look at this clip.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Would you know if you're being influenced? Like, how much do you know about LDS beliefs? What is their gospel?
Well, the phrase "how much do I know?" I think I would say.
Well, tell me two things. What is their gospel, and who do they believe Jesus is?
Well, here's why I'm going to defer that question and maybe hope to maybe get a little bit more specific, because I'm not trying to shirk the question. It's I'm going to say I don't know enough to intelligently say, to answer a question like what is their gospel with
Which
authority.
Is why I ask.
So I'm not going to claim that I know enough to know. I know quite a bit, I think, because I've done a lot of study and I've spoken to a lot of LDS folks over the last 3 years, including some of the highest ranking members of the church. And I've asked a lot of questions, but I'm still not comfortable in a public forum saying this is their gospel, because that's such a huge question. So I'm not going to, for both their sake and for mine and for yours and for the show's, claim that I know enough to say this is their gospel.
Okay, so there we heard Dallas concede a major point of difference between his own personal beliefs and the beliefs of a fairly foundational belief of the LDS Church. And Melissa's making a very fine point that, if the churches were exactly the same, Mormon missionaries wouldn't be coming to our door and trying to convince us to believe in their way. It's because, Joseph Smith has said that our views are impure. We're not saying that. I mean, we are saying that about Mormons, but Joseph Smith kind of started this with the very first page in the Book of Mormon, saying that he looked for the most pure church and had a vision of God that said, there is no pure church. I'm going to give you a revelation to start your own. So there are clear differences between us. And I think that that is important for us to be transparent about and to think about. All right, let's look at one more clip here from Melissa's conversation. I'm going to fast forward it to about an hour and 11 minutes into the discussion. And we're going to hear them continue to talk about um, what LDS people believe, and Melissa tries to nail Dallas down about that issue.
Very clear, because words are very important. I have had those conversations that you just described, conservatively speaking, dozens of times. I have had late night conversations until 3 a.m. while we were, together working on the show, or planning out marketing meetings or whatever. And I've stayed up till 3 a.m. talking with an LDS friend about the gospel and about what they believe. And I have pulled out and said, this is what this says. What is your response to that? And all I can tell you is, again, because those are private conversations, so I'm not going to get into the details of them or name names or anything like that. But all I can tell you is that a good chunk of the time, they have said that was taken out of context, or that is not actual official orthodoxy. That's a church leader who wrote that 70 years ago.
If it's from their church website, though, I mean, you're talking about basic LDS beliefs that a Mormon missionary would bring to your door, that nobody would argue with, that are very easily debated, that are it's different. It's a different gospel and a different Jesus. So it's more than semantics. It's more than
I'm just using examples. I'm just using one example, but I'm saying there are multiple things from the foundational beliefs of LDS Church that are canon and doctrine, to things that are supposed canon and doctrine by people who don't know it as well, who are making assumptions. But I have asked all of those, very, very detailed questions, and we have had very detailed and heartfelt debates. I'm just not willing to share, when you ask a question that's as broad, which is a great question, but as broad as what is their gospel, or where do you stand on all these things? It's just, unless we had 10 hours, I'm hesitant to get into it. When it comes to something this important, especially when it's not related to the content of the show, I'm going to be more cautious and deferential. So, but just want to make it very clear. I have had very detailed, very long, very intense conversations with LDS folks from all levels of the church. They know exactly where I stand. They know exactly my faith. They know exactly the evangelical, I shouldn't even say the evangelical, the Dallas Jenkins belief about the foundation of Scripture and all of those things. And I would just say that they, at least the people that I've talked to, have 100% agreed with me, far more than I expected. I'm just saying, I just want to be clear, and I also want to be somewhat defensive of my LDS friends, in the sense of, I don't want to say that the areas where we agree mean that they don't still support the LDS Church. I think they would argue they do support the LDS Church. Well, I know they would, because they're part of it, and that they would just say that we are misinterpreting it. And some people are comfortable saying, who aren't LDS, are saying, no, I'm not misinterpreting it. You're wrong. You don't get it. And I'm less comfortable saying that. Doesn't mean I waffle on the majors. Doesn't mean that I waffle on my own faith. I'm just not as comfortable speaking definitively about their faith and saying that I understand the wording and I understand the nuance of their faith more than they do.
Would you agree that you're still learning, that you're still you seem like that, like you seem like you're open to learning more, and I don't know, you don't seem like you would be like the type of guy that would think, okay, I'm going to stand by this theological heresy or whatever it is. This is a big problem, and not talk to them about it. I respect the fact. Good. Yeah, 100%. This is such an enlightening conversation, because you just seem to have a very strong conviction for that. And it's almost like you have an evangelical, you want to spread the gospel in that aspect. And the apologist in me is like, oh, Dallas, let me come alongside you, bud. Like if you're as strong in the faith as you say and as you seem, I think it's not a bad thing that they're in maybe you're in their circle of influence, that you're placed in their lives, for the purpose of spreading the gospel, as you seem so passionately to be about.
Okay, I think that's a great place to stop that. And so what is very clear to me about what Dallas is doing here, and again, why am I playing long clips? It's because I think that, I want to give you an example of hearing someone out. I think Melissa's doing a great job of doing that. And so I think that, while I wish that Dallas was more forthcoming and saying, look, here's where I stand, in a more succinct way, here's where LDS people are, her pressing him to articulate LDS beliefs, it couldn't come across as like, why does he sound like he's kind of waffling? Why won't he just come out and clearly say, oh, yes, this is what LDS people believe? Um, again, there's a part of me that can understand what he's doing. I think, and I'm speculating, but I think that Dallas is engaging in a type of strategy. I think that he doesn't want to get tangled up in the kind of the web of, then not only now does he have to articulate his own beliefs as a Christian, now he's on the hook to articulate accurately LDS beliefs. And to be honest, I've never seen a director have to go through this much scrutiny over their worldview system in front of Christians. I think Dallas is very forbearing and patient in answering the same questions over and over again. But I think that what is important for us to know is his hesitancy about articulating LDS beliefs was real, as he said there. It wasn't just a perceived thing where um, you know, Melissa's trying to get him to say something, and he was hemming and hawing. You could see it if you watch the whole interview, but you kind of got the gist of it in what I played. And finally, at the end there, he's just like saying, "Look, I don't want to be the expert on their beliefs. I can respect that." So sometime later, after Dallas was on Melissa's podcast, he actually went back on the Saints Unscripted podcast, and which was the original LDS podcast that we watched at the top of um, this stream. And they talked about his interview with Melissa, and it was kind of interesting to see Dallas's reaction. So let's take a look at that.
I watched an interview that you recently did with a nice lady, and holy cow, she grilled you. She really put you on the ropes there a little bit about the Latter-day Saint faith, which I found extremely interesting because, one, you're not a Latter-day Saint, you're an evangelical, but I really wanted to start this interview off by just from the bottom of my heart thanking you for how you handled that. She put some tough questions to you. She's obviously not a big fan of the Latter-day Saint faith. She seems very eager to explain to Latter-day Saints what they believe, which is always, a treat for us Latter-day Saints. But she grilled you on not just what your beliefs are, but what your understanding of Latter-day Saint beliefs are and how you feel about those beliefs. Obviously, you disagree with, plenty of our beliefs, and you were not shy about making that known. But you were careful not to speak for our faith. You were careful to recognize nuance in our faith and to recognize that sometimes there are misunderstandings about faiths that you may be less familiar with. And you did it in a way that I think was not only respectful to us, but also was conveyed very well where you stand. And where you stand is you disagree with us on many issues, and that's totally fine, but you had the opportunity to throw us under the bus and to, engage in some friendly banter at our expense, and you didn't. And as a faith that frankly is not super well liked, if I'm being totally honest and speaking in generalizations here, that means a lot. And so I wanted to thank you for that show of respect.
Well, I appreciate that. I want to make very clear, Melissa, who did the interview with me, she's great. She's become a friend, I think, through that process. The interview, I think, was fair. She's tough, obviously. I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't think you become a successful commentator like she has become without being tough, but also fair. So I really enjoyed the conversation. And I think it's also very important to make clear that, like, I've had a few Latter-day Saints tell me, thank you so much, like you just said, for for that. I didn't really do it. I hope this comes out right. I didn't do it to be an apologist for the LDS faith, or to even be a defender of the LDS faith. It really is, for me, about the fact that I disagree with several tenets, including some big ones within the LDS faith. But I don't believe that my LDS friends, or my Catholic friends, or my Greek Orthodox friends, or my Jewish friends, or my evangelical friends, and that's the key, or myself, have the monopoly on criticizable theology, or have the monopoly on a need for the Savior. And some people have said to me, well, through this show, it's important that when you are with people of other faiths or people who have it wrong, that you evangelize. And there's concern from some people, evangelicals in particular, because I'm surrounded on this project by so many people of all different faiths. For some reason, they seem to care more about the LDS people I'm with than anyone else. I'm not quite sure why that is. But LDS, Catholic, agnostic, atheist, all stripes of the spiritual or lack thereof rainbow. And there seems to be this perception that I'm supposed to take advantage of every opportunity I have to not only share my faith and not only portray the Jesus of the Gospels, but to counteract, argue with, point out the wrong, correct, etc., of any other faiths that might have it wrong. And I just don't believe, that that's my role. I believe my role primarily is to accurately portray the authentic Jesus to a billion people around the world. And I'm in my own church, surrounded by, occasionally, I shouldn't say surrounded by, but I know people who also have things in their faith or in their relationship with God that could use some education, could use some buttoning up, could use some improving, some clarity, some maturity. And I consider that to be true of myself. So to me, I loved the interview. I love Melissa. I think it's great. I think she had the opportunity to share what she passionately believes about the LDS faith. So I don't think anyone can come away from that video confused about where she stands on it. I don't think people know exactly where I stand on all of it. And I think that's okay, because again, on a public forum, I don't believe it's my job, nor do I believe it's really right for me to speak authoritatively or intelligently about the nuances of the LDS faith. I'm not LDS. I have to say, your website doesn't do you any favors necessarily, because it includes so many things that every now and then I'll go to an LDS friend of mine and I'll say, so why does it say this? And what do you believe about this? And they'll go, yeah, that's from X person who, that's not canon. That's one person's belief, and it's not necessarily everyone's belief or whatever it is. And so, but that's more of a marketing thing than anything. I don't get into that, but I'll just say, yeah, it's been quite a ride. And it all came out of my conversation with you. I said that you, that many LDS folks and I love the same Jesus. I still believe that. It's gotten me in a lot of trouble, but I still believe that. And I have a bit of a superpower in that I don't really care if something that I say that I passionately believe is criticized. I care, of course, if I'm wrong. I care if I believe in healthy correction. But I also, when I went back to the interview, my conversation with you, and I was like, what did I say that caused this much angst for some people? And I believe actually in the first interview, I was pretty nuanced with you. I actually said, I'm not LDS. I disagree with a lot of LDS things. It's just that the people that I know, at least the majority, especially when we're talking about Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus of the Gospels, we love the same Jesus. We may have some strong differences of opinion, and you may believe some things about Jesus before the Gospels, and particularly after the Gospels. But I believe that I have come to know deeply some LDS folks that I would die for, that I would crawl on glass with, that I have crawled on glass with for this project and who share my belief to make the authentic Jesus known to the world. And if it's a different Jesus, then they're actually really bad because they're working really hard to get this show out to the world. And so if it's part of some really big con, it's a really bad one because
It's all part of our plan.
Yeah, it would be. You're doing a really poor job of it.
All right, let's start to bring all of these threads together. In answer to the questions, does Dallas Jenkins believe that LDS members and historic Christians believe in the same Jesus? It seems like what he's arguing is that both religions affirm the King James Version of the Bible, and it's the same Jesus. The differences get introduced to that Jesus picture on the LDS side when we get into their other holy books. But because the Book of Mormon happens chronologically after Jesus's ascension in our Bibles, he's saying that it's the same Jesus. Now, do I buy this argument? That's a different question. Because obviously not. We do not worship the same Jesus. It is different Jesuses. The features described of Jesus in the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, etc., is different than the Jesus of historic Christianity. And again, it was Joseph Smith who said it first that all the other churches were impure. That's us. Okay. So I think though this technicality that Dallas wants to put forward, that it's the same Jesus, does this work theologically? No, I don't think this works. Technically, maybe this works because, again, King James Bible, King versus King James Bible. But the problem with the average Mormon is that, or a member of the LDS Church, they put the Book of Mormon on top of the Bible. They put the Book of Mormon as a higher priority, more pure scripture. While they believe in the King James Version of the Bible, they would say, insofar as it's correctly translated, they believe that there's a level of corruption in our Bible. And so they look at the Book of Mormon as being more pure. And so they put higher weight on its authority, and they use it as an interpretive lens for the Bible. And Dallas doesn't address this issue. And it's kind of a major issue. And I think that there's part of me that I can be sympathetic with those who, when Dallas talks in these very circuitous ways, it makes evangelicals feel a little leery about what he's doing. And they perceive that maybe he's being a little less than honest, because this issue of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, being used as a lens through which the Bible is interpreted, it's kind of a major issue. That's not like some tertiary point over here. But again, if I just look at the show as it stands on its own, I don't at this point see any slam dunk for LDS theology. As far as Dallas's statements, the same Jesus statements, I understand what he's trying to do. I'm wondering, and I love what Melissa said at the very end of that clip there, is I'm almost wondering if this is like an evangelism strategy that he's using, of not slamming LDS members and beliefs in public, because he has to work with these people. And who knows what's happening behind the scenes. His description of conversations with LDS friends is very relatable to me. I think that I've wondered, is he trying to, in some kind of way, preserve those relationships and not put those beliefs on blast in public so that he can maintain some relational credibility, some relational capital, so that he can stay in those deep conversations until 2 a.m. with LDS members? How often does that happen? where an LDS member and a member of historic Christianity have that deep level of friendship where maybe he can speak into their lives in an evangelistic way. And, you know, I'm not going to call Dallas Jenkins a liar. That is just not my jurisdiction. Again, I'm not an elder in his church. I'm not in spiritual authority over him. I am a YouTuber. Okay. And no other YouTuber that, as far as I know, has spiritual authority in Dallas Jenkins' life. Now, we could be careful about how we comment about things that he says, but I don't have any spiritual jurisdiction over him. And as far as I can tell, Dallas Jenkins is a brother in the Lord who sometimes speaks in very circuitous ways, and he is clear about the differences between the LDS church and historic Christianity, but he's trying to forge some common ground with them in public for the sake of relationship and for the sake of the show. I'm going to chalk that up to his heart for evangelism and the desire to get the chosen out to as many people as possible. So at this point, I want to circle back to a previous comment that I made in a previous stream, that at times I don't think Dallas Jenkins is careful about what he says. And we've seen some example of that, in what we've watched today, because there are times when he's very vague. And I've heard him mention a couple of times on interviews that he thinks he has a superpower of not caring what other people think. And I guess that could be good in the age of social media and all the hyper scrutiny that he's been under. And that said, I do think that he hasn't always acted graciously to push back. His initial response to the doctrinal concerns in the season 3 trailer, which again we kind of examined in detail last time and said, I don't think this concern is warranted. But his initial response to that pushback was dismissive, was a bit off-putting, kind of defensive. I tried to find that video back so I could play it. I don't know if maybe if it was scrubbed, I couldn't find it back. But basically, he just thought the feedback was dumb. And he loved the line, I am the law of Moses. He just kept saying, I love the line. It's a great line. And he really just thought that the feedback was kind of dumb, which, again, I don't agree with the concern, but I think there would have been possibly a more gracious way of addressing it in public. But more recently, he made a joke about Joseph Smith that I just think is kind of unfortunate. I'm going to put it up on the screen here for you. This is from a Facebook post, December 26, 2022. The most common question after episode 3 of season 3, what did Jesus whisper to Lazarus? And we saw that scene last time in the last episode. He says, I'll reveal the mystery in the comments. And scroll down, and here's his response. I'm about to quote the Book of Mormon. Now, this is in reference to everyone's concern, or a lot of people's concern, about the Book of Mormon. I just thought that was a fairly ungracious way of handling that. But I think Dallas Jenkins has kind of an edgy sense of humor. I'm going to unfold the replies here. Some people appreciated his sense of humor. Thanks for having a sense of humor. Some people appreciated it, mostly not. Some people said, I love your sense of humor. You're stirring things up. Other people didn't like it. I specifically follow The Chosen because it's Bible-based. The Book of Mormon is not. And so, not everybody got the mockery and sarcasm. And so then after the firestorm, there was even a write-up about it in churchleaders.com where they were commenting about the joke. And so then he had a follow-up post on December 30th, 2022, where he posted a link to the churchleaders.com article. And then he made a comment in the comments. It says, for the record, the reason my joke about us not having Jesus on the cross winking at Joseph Smith, which I think was a comment that he had put in the previous string, and I don't have that, but he says, is not actually a joke about Jesus on the cross, is because our show isn't the Bible and Jonathan isn't Jesus. We know the difference between the show, our actors, me, the Bible, Jesus, God. We can and should make fun of the former. Now, 738 people liked this comment. I think that this is very convenient for Dallas. You know, he's like, on the one hand, he wants to, in interviews, present an authentic picture of Jesus. And then on the other hand, he wants permission to be able to say, well, it's just Jonathan Rumi. And we all know that he's just a human and he's not really Jesus. Well, Dallas, you can't have it both ways here, buddy. And, you know, these kinds of jokes, they're just kind of Dallas's edgy humor. Some people don't know what to make of how he comes across sometimes as kind of arrogant and outspoken. I guess I have a different take on it, from being sort of around on occasion some people who've worked in Hollywood. To me, this is just typical Hollywood humor. This is just typical Hollywood ways of acting and being. And when you're with Christians who work professionally in Hollywood, they're often kind of edgy like this in their humor. I think it's more of a cultural thing, but I think it's real hard for the average Christian, especially like someone living in small town, you know, middle of the country, flyover country. They don't get it. They don't get this kind of edgy humor. I'm not saying it's bad or right or anything. I'm not making a moral judgment about it. I guess to me it just strikes me as being more of a cultural expression based on some of my experience in interacting with Christians who work in Hollywood. I could be wrong. I'm not excusing it. It is off putting to me, but it also kind of strikes me as being that way. Personally, I find these jokes kind of tasteless. Um, you know, that's just an opinion. But that's kind of my assessment of that. Wow, this has been a lot. But at the end of the day, as we're wrapping up here, what do I think about the concern that Dallas Jenkins thinks LDS people worship the same Jesus as we do as historic Christians? Yes and no. It's a complicated answer. He does, on a technicality, I think that is what he is arguing. If we look at the LDS Church's affirmation of the King James Bible and our Bible, but the church also believes that our Bible is corrupt, and so it needs these additional add-ons from the Book of Mormon. These additional add-ons, he would say he disagrees with. But he would not say it's a different Jesus. He just says these add-ons are wrong. That's my best attempt at understanding his position. I hope you have found this helpful in how to persevere with someone as they're explaining their position, to try to hone in on what is it that they are exactly trying to articulate in their view. Future analysis, I'm probably going to be doing some shows related to Roman Catholicism, because that's an issue I have not yet covered in this series. I know a couple of the major actors are Roman Catholics and have had some questions about that on my social media. I will also likely later in the year do a conversation related to the question, does a show like The Chosen or The Passion of the Christ or even the Jesus film violate the second commandment? I've been doing a deep dive on that. I will probably do some additional teachings this year on sola scriptura, because there seems to be a lot of confusion about what sola scriptura means and what it doesn't mean. And one of the things that I am keeping my eye on that I think might actually be a bigger concern than anything I've talked about so far is there has been so little talk in the series about sin and repentance. There's been a little, but not much. And this is a major feature of Jesus's life and ministry. To be honest, for me, that concerns me more than some of these other issues that'll have a lot of people up in their emotions about it. I actually think the thing that I'm keeping my eye on the most is the messaging of how do you come to believe in Jesus as the Messiah, walk with him, become a disciple, and the issue of sin and repentance. That's really the thing that I am on the lookout for. With that, we'll wrap up this conversation for now, and but we'll continue it throughout the year. We'll keep revisiting some key themes that I've talked about. I hope you found this helpful. I do look forward to your feedback about it, and please share it with a friend. Thank you. Good night, and God bless.